The council room was silent except for the soft hum of the holographic displays, where the battle data was projected in a sweeping arc. Alpha stood at the head of the table, gazing at the images of devastation. His mind was heavy with the weight of the battle's outcome, analyzing every detail, every failure, every loss. The damage was extensive. Across the planet, large sections of wax cities were now reduced to rubble. The once smooth crystalline structures had been torn apart, their edges shattered by a new kind of energy the wax had never encountered before. Lyra, standing beside him, tapped the controls, and the holograms shifted, zooming in on one of the more heavily damaged city sectors. "We need to understand exactly what happened," Lyra said, her tone analytical. "The outer shield barrier failed at the point of impact. And the core city's defenses were overwhelmed within minutes of the initial assault." On the holographic display, a detailed simulation of the battle played out. Trion ships, massive and heavily armed, descended upon Wax's peaceful cities, unleashing an onslaught of energy beams that struck the Wax's defensive energy shields. The Wax had not anticipated the scale or force of the Trion attack. The shields, designed to absorb and redirect energy from natural phenomena or minor attacks, buckled under the weight of the Trion weapons. The shields held for a brief moment, but the sheer intensity of the Trion firepower created a resonance effect that destabilized them, Lyra continued, pointing to the analysis results. "Their weapons don't just hit the shields, they cause them to vibrate at frequencies that overload the system." Alpha's gaze hardened as the next part of the simulation showed the results of the Trion attack. "Our shields absorbed less than 30% of the initial barrage. The rest passed through and caused significant damage to critical infrastructure. They targeted our energy nodes, places where our cities draw their power." The display zoomed in on the aftermath. Blackened craters marked where the energy nodes once stood, and energy lines that once coursed through the Wax cities now flickered erratically. The destruction was staggering, but it was the tactical brilliance of the Trion assault that worried Alpha the most. "They knew exactly where to strike," Lyra muttered, her fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "These weapons were designed to disrupt our most vulnerable systems." Alpha's mind raced. The Wax had always prided themselves on their ability to manipulate energy for peaceful means, transportation, architecture, medicine, but this was a different kind of conflict. The Trions were methodical and ruthless, understanding not just how to destroy but how to exploit weaknesses with precision. They used a type of energy surge we've never seen before. "It's as if they studied our shield technology in depth," Lyra continued, as the holograms shifted to show the frequency analysis of the Trion weapons. These pulses, localized bursts of high-frequency radiation, targeted the weak points in our shields, causing them to collapse. Alpha clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "We've always been able to manipulate energy to our advantage, but this is beyond our understanding. How can we protect ourselves from an enemy that can adapt so quickly?" Lyra paused for a moment before answering. "We can't protect ourselves using the same methods. We'll need to find a new way to handle their firepower. We need to turn our energy manipulation into something more lethal." As the analysis continued, the full extent of the Wax's vulnerability became clear. The outer defense systems had fared better, thanks to the advanced alloys in their construction, but the interior cities, the ones closest to their core energy reserves, had suffered the most. The Wax had never expected to need an offensive weapon, they had built their civilization on peace, on energy manipulation as a means of creating harmony, not destruction. "We've always relied on defense, but the reality is we can't keep our cities safe just by manipulating energy. Our energy shields are reactive. They protect us, but they don't strike back." Lyra's voice was calm, but there was a determination behind it now. "We need to harness our energy in a way that gives us the upper hand." Alpha nodded slowly. "Our greatest weakness, then, is our inability to strike. We must evolve. I want options, and I want them fast." The room was silent for a moment as the advisors absorbed the gravity of Alpha's words. The Wax civilization was now at a crossroads. They had no choice but to adapt, to create weapons that could hold their ground against the Trion's superior technology. "We'll need to develop offensive energy-based weapons," Lyra continued, as she glanced at the engineers gathered in the room. "We need to reconfigure our energy manipulation systems. I propose we start with the energy blade, an offensive weapon that channels concentrated energy into a blade capable of cutting through Trion armor." The idea of creating a weapon was unthinkable to some in the room, but it was clear that their survival depended on this new path. Alpha's gaze hardened as he weighed the risks. He knew this was a dangerous course, but one they couldn't avoid. They could no longer afford to only defend. It was time to turn their energy abilities into a force of offense, and if they didn't, the Trions would overrun them. "We must create something to strike back, but it must be controlled. We must not lose sight of who we are. The Wax will not become the aggressors, but we will not allow ourselves to be destroyed." Lyra's workshop had become a frenzy of activity. The once serene environment, filled with the soft hum of research and peaceful study, was now filled with the sharp sounds of tools, equipment, and engineers working tirelessly. Lyra stood in the center of it all, directing the efforts of a small team of scientists and engineers as they worked on the prototype for the Wax's first true offensive weapon, the energy blade. The energy blade, a glowing weapon composed entirely of condensed energy, was a direct result of the battle's analysis. The Wax had always been able to manipulate energy on a small scale, controlling light, moving objects with focused force, but turning it into a weapon capable of causing harm was something entirely new. Lyra stood over the first prototype, a shimmering blade of energy that hummed with an intensity that could barely be controlled. It hovered above a metallic hilt, its form fluctuating as the energy was stabilized within the crystalline structure. The blade was unstable, pulsing erratically, but it was a breakthrough. "This will be the key to giving our warriors an edge," Lyra said, her voice full of both excitement and caution. "We've taken our energy manipulation and focused it into a narrow beam, concentrating all our power into a short-range cutting tool." One of the engineers, a young Wax named Elian, cautiously extended his hand toward the prototype, adjusting the energy flow to stabilize the blade. It flickered, then stabilized into a more solid form. The hum grew louder, a sign that the energy was being condensed effectively. Lyra nodded in approval. "It's powerful," Elian said, cautiously moving the blade through the air. "But it's still unpredictable. We'll need to refine the containment fields around the blade. A single wrong move could cause an overload." Lyra agreed. "It's a start, but we need to work out the kinks. We need to focus on accuracy and control." Despite its instability, the energy blade was a significant development. With it, the Wax could now create an offensive weapon capable of cutting through the heavily armored Trion soldiers. It was a weapon that required precision, but it was a weapon nonetheless. The next project was the energy cannons, larger, more powerful weapons designed to strike from a distance. These cannons were a direct response to the overwhelming power of the Trion ships. With their shields weakened, the Wax realized that close combat wasn't an option. They needed to develop a weapon that could project energy at long range, capable of piercing the Trion's heavily fortified ships. The first prototype of the energy cannon was a massive stationary device that could channel vast amounts of energy into a focused beam. It resembled a large cannon, but instead of traditional projectiles, it projected a concentrated bolt of energy capable of piercing through enemy armor. Elian and Lyra stood on the observation platform as the first test was about to begin. Below them, a team of engineers had carefully positioned the cannon in the center of the testing grounds. The target, a replica of a Trion ship, constructed from a similar material, sat at a distance of several hundred meters. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, Lyra's eyes locked onto the cannon's targeting system, watching the energy readings carefully. 2, 1. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the cannon, and a massive energy pulse shot forward, colliding with the target. The explosion shook the air, sending a shockwave through the testing grounds. The target was obliterated. The Trion ship replica was gone, reduced to molten scrap. Elian let out a relieved breath. It works. The cannon is effective, but it's going to drain our energy reserves quickly. We'll need to find a way to generate more power, or we risk running out of energy before we can fully defend ourselves. Lyra nodded, still processing the magnitude of the test. This weapon will be a game changer, but we must ensure we can produce enough power to use it effectively. If we run out of energy, we're defenseless. The energy cannons were a powerful addition to the Wax's arsenal, but they came with their own set of challenges: energy consumption, maintenance, and the need for constant power generation. Lyra and her team would need to address these limitations quickly, or the cannons would become as much of a liability as an advantage. Reinforced energy shields. Back in the heart of Wax's crystal caverns, a team of engineers led by Lyra uncovered something that would change the course of their shield technology forever. Deep beneath the surface, in the heart of the planet's most ancient crystal formations, a rare metal was found, an alloy with unique properties that could amplify the Wax's energy manipulation. This metal, which Lyra had theorized existed but never fully confirmed, could be synthesized into a new form of energy shield. The newly reinforced shields would be able to absorb more energy from enemy attacks and redirect it back at the aggressors. But it wasn't just about resilience, it was about adaptability. Lyra and her team spent days experimenting with the new alloy, fusing it with their existing energy shield technology. The result was a stronger, more flexible shield capable of withstanding a higher level of attack. The shields could absorb much more energy before reaching their breaking point, and, more importantly, they could now reflect certain types of energy back toward the enemy. "Look at this," Lyra said, presenting the results to Alpha and the Council. The holographic projection showed the new shield technology in action, with energy blasts deflected and redirected. The new shields were a marked improvement. Alpha studied the data, his expression unreadable. "This is an improvement, but how long can we sustain this power? How many of these can we produce?" "It's going to be difficult to mass-produce," Lyra explained. "The alloy is rare, and synthesizing it takes time. But it's a significant step forward. We'll have to focus on reinforcing key locations and critical energy points, areas where the Trions are most likely to target." Despite the progress, the new energy shields came with their own set of challenges. The need for constant power sources was more pressing than ever. As the Wax began preparing for more attacks, their ability to generate and store energy was stretched to its limits. The heart of the Wax civilization had always been their intellectual pursuits: learning, knowledge, and peace. Their society had never known war, and the very idea of combat was foreign to them. Now, in the wake of the Trion attack, the need for warriors had become undeniable. Alpha and Lyra understood that their people had to adapt quickly, or they would be wiped out. They couldn't rely on their energy shields alone, nor could they depend solely on their technology. Lyra oversaw the development of a new training program designed to teach the Wax how to defend themselves, not only through their natural abilities but also through a focused and disciplined combat approach. It was a difficult transition. Many of the Wax were reluctant, their peaceful nature at odds with the demands of war. Yet, there were those who stepped forward, driven by a sense of duty, to protect their people and the civilization Alpha had built. The first few weeks of training were disorienting. The warriors in training struggled to understand the complexities of combat. Many of them had never been in a physical confrontation before, much less a life-or-death battle. They had spent their lives refining their energy manipulation powers in controlled environments, not using them in the chaos of a battlefield. The training grounds were set up in the heart of the city, a large open space surrounded by crystalline structures, now fortified to resist Trion weaponry. The Wax warriors practiced energy manipulation techniques, learning how to harness their abilities under stress, learning to project force fields, deflect incoming energy blasts, and form energy-based weapons. For some, the transition was easy. Their natural connection to energy manipulation made them fast learners. They could create shields and energy blasts with ease. But for others, the challenge was more daunting. The sheer intensity of battle, the chaos, and the fear were things they had never experienced in their peaceful lives. Lyra worked tirelessly, guiding the warriors through the basics. She demonstrated how to form protective shields, how to concentrate their energy into focused bursts, and how to use the newly developed energy blades in close combat. "We have never fought as one before," Lyra told her students one evening, standing at the center of the training grounds. "But we must learn. To protect our cities, to protect our future, we must fight with our minds, our spirits, and our energy." The first few days were grueling. The Wax's natural agility and intelligence were useful, but it wasn't enough to overcome the chaos of combat. Many of them froze when they saw an opponent charging toward them. Others panicked and their shields faltered or when their attacks missed their mark. The sense of calm and control they had always relied upon seemed to be slipping away. But with each new drill, they adapted. The warriors began to understand that they weren't merely relying on physical prowess, they were using their psychic abilities, their connection to the energy of the planet, to shift the tides of battle. Some warriors learned how to form complex energy barriers, redirecting incoming energy blasts away from themselves and their comrades. Others used their energy to generate massive blasts, knocking enemies off balance or creating enough force to incapacitate them. In one training session, Lyra demonstrated the energy blade's true potential. She moved through the mock battlefield with precision, her energy blade cutting through a series of energy shields and armor plates designed to mimic Trion soldiers. The other warriors watched in awe as she demonstrated the destructive power of the blade. "Elian, can you show them?" Lyra called. The young warrior, who had shown remarkable aptitude in energy manipulation, stepped forward, holding his own energy blade with determination. His first strike was shaky, the blade flickering, but with Lyra's guidance, Elian focused his energy. He swung again, and the blade sliced cleanly through a target, the energy singing through the air. The warriors around him cheered. Elian smiled but knew he still had much to learn. "Good. But remember, control is everything," Lyra said. "Don't rely solely on power. It's the precision that will win battles, not brute force." With Lyra's leadership, the training program slowly began to take shape. Soon, the Wax warriors were working together in teams, practicing coordinated attacks and defense strategies. Their energy manipulation abilities allowed them to synchronize their movements, creating a seamless flow of force fields, energy blasts, and precision strikes. They learned to fight as a unit, relying not just on their individual powers but also on their collective strength. Yet, not all of the Wax were able to adapt. The elders, those who had lived their entire lives in peace, struggled with the violence. Some resisted the notion of fighting, feeling that it contradicted everything they had believed in. There were even a few who felt that their society had gone too far, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But for Alpha, the urgency of the situation left no room for hesitation. He continued to encourage the warriors, even as his doubts about their ability to fully transition to war lingered. His own leadership was tested by the resistance within his people. He had built a society focused on harmony, and now he had to convince them to fight to protect it. It was a hard pill to swallow, but Alpha knew it was necessary for their survival. Throughout the training process, Lyra became a key figure in the warriors' transformation. While Alpha focused on the broader strategy of the war, Lyra took on the mantle of leadership in the training camps. Her scientific mind and hands-on approach made her the ideal teacher. She understood both the theory of their energy manipulation powers and the practical application of those powers in combat. Her knowledge and leadership were invaluable in guiding the Wax through this turbulent time. Lyra's presence on the training grounds inspired confidence in the warriors. She didn't just teach them how to fight, she showed them how to harness their potential. She believed in them, even when they doubted themselves. "The strength to fight doesn't come from your power alone," Lyra often said. "It comes from your belief in your ability to make a difference. Remember, we fight not just for survival, but for the future we want to protect." As the Wax adapted to their new reality, the pressure to defend their civilization grew heavier with each passing day. Their training was progressing, but even with their enhanced energy shields, newly developed energy weapons, and the growing strength of their warriors, they knew that their survival against the Trions would require more than just defense. They needed something far more powerful, something that could tip the scales in their favor. The breakthrough came when Lyra, working with a team of scientists and engineers, uncovered an ancient artifact buried deep within Wax's crystal caverns, an artifact that had been left untouched since the earliest days of the planet's creation. It was a dormant device, its purpose unknown to all but the most ancient records of the Wax, a relic from the time when their civilization had first begun to take shape. This device was the Nexus Core. Lyra and her team carefully studied the artifact, deciphering its intricate design and understanding its purpose. The Nexus Core was a powerful amplification device, capable of boosting the Wax's energy manipulation abilities to extraordinary levels. When activated, the core could unleash unimaginable amounts of energy, enough to vaporize entire fleets of Trion ships, alter the very atmosphere of Wax to create impenetrable barriers, or create devastating energy storms capable of wiping out large portions of the Trion forces. Yet the Nexus Core was not without its risks. Lyra's tests revealed that it was highly unstable. The sheer amount of energy it could generate was difficult to control, and any miscalculation could result in catastrophic consequences, both for the Wax and for the planet itself. The power it held was both a blessing and a curse. In Lyra's words, it was a weapon of last resort, one that could either save them or doom them all. The discovery of the Nexus Core sent shockwaves through the Wax leadership. While Alpha recognized the potential of such a weapon, he was deeply torn about whether to use it. The Wax had always stood for peace, harmony, and cooperation. To unleash such destructive power would go against everything they had built, everything they had believed in. But the threat from the Trions was too great to ignore. Alpha knew that if they didn't act, the Wax civilization could be destroyed. Tensions within the Wax Council mounted. Some members argued that the Nexus Core was a necessary tool in the fight for survival. The Trions had already attacked with devastating force, and it was clear that conventional weapons and defense strategies would not be enough. They needed to strike back with overwhelming power to ensure the survival of their people. The Nexus Core, in their eyes, was the only way to level the playing field. Others, however, feared the consequences of unleashing such a weapon. They believed that using the Nexus Core would be an act of desperation, one that would compromise the very ideals that the Wax had worked so hard to uphold. To them, the use of such a weapon would forever alter their society, transforming them from peaceful intellectuals into a war machine. They feared that the Wax would lose their humanity in the process. Alpha found himself in the middle of this debate, caught between the desire to protect his people and the fear of losing everything that the Wax had stood for. In the end, he knew that the decision was his to make. The council could argue, but it was Alpha who would have to bear the weight of their future. After much deliberation, Alpha called for a final meeting with Lyra and the council. "We cannot afford to make this decision lightly," Alpha said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "If we use the Nexus Core, we must understand that it will change everything. It will change us. But if we do nothing, the Trions will destroy us." Lyra stepped forward, her face set with determination. "The Nexus Core may be our only chance to survive. But I will continue to work on it, to refine it, to ensure it is as safe as possible before we use it. We must control it, not let it control us." After hours of discussion, Alpha made his decision. The Nexus Core would be used, but only as a last resort. The Wax would continue to build their defenses and strengthen their warriors. They would not abandon their principles, but they would be ready to unleash the power of the Nexus Core if the Trions pushed them to the brink of annihilation. The moral dilemma was far from over. There were still many within the Wax who opposed the use of such a powerful weapon, but the situation was growing more dire by the day. Alpha knew that the time was coming when they would have to face the full force of the Trion fleet once more. And when that time came, the WACs would have to decide whether they were willing to risk everything to protect their civilization.